so that we can have it later. So welcome again, third session of the webinar here to servedental.com. We're going to talk about the modified try-in workflow in 3Shape. All right, so let me share my screen now so you can see. Share. All right, so here we are. We're ready to start, and let's start with the fact that the doctor has modified the try-in, and the doctor has scanned it in their office. It's the most common workflow, so we'll start with that one. And so we get this scan in, and we know that we've already got the denture designed from before, but now we have this new data. So what do? First, we're going to set up a new case. So let me get the designer over. All right. So the new case, this happens to be an upper. So maxillary denture that went out, doctor modified it. There's just a new wash impression, and the occlusion is just adjusted. So I'm going to set my new case materials up. It's going to be Lucitone digital print resin, and it's going to be DS arch print. Could be base with design teeth, artificial tooth, and I'm going to use obviously the Dead Splice from the library. And then I like to, as always, segment my teeth. Posterior and anterior blocks. All right, so the case is set up. And now I got to talk about how the data is coming in. We know that the dentist used an intraoral wand to take it. So we're going to call this in the scan settings a digital impression. And I will click on OK. And it will take me back to the admin screen. The case is now set up. Once the lock goes away, then we have to bring in the scans. So this is where a lot of folks, venture off. They want to copy and reuse try-in now, but you have to bring in the scans first. So let's import the scan data from the doctor. Right-click on the case, import scan. Upper jaw. Okay, let me go find that file folder again. Here. All right. Modified prototype with wash. So there's my upper scan. Posing. So there's the lower. And then OX rim, which is a scan of the bite of the modified try-in and the opposing. So let 3Shape bring in that data. So now the data is in there. And this is where we right-click on this case. And we go down to copy. And there's that fourth choice that hadn't been there before. Copy and reuse try-in design. So that shows up because we set up a new case. We brought in some scans. And now it's giving us that option. If you don't bring in the scans, you won't see that option. And that's where, sometimes even I get lost. So I'm going to click that. And this window pops up, which may be new to a lot of you. So this is the select order to copy and reuse try-in. So what it's doing is it's looking back at your cases. Now, number one has to be in 22, 23. Number two, both of these cases have to be set up on the same dongle number. So if you set up the first case on one dongle, if you have separate design module dongles, and you try to do it on the second one, it's not going to show up. You're going to have to go over and import the original design into the second dongle for it to work. But that's just a right click and import case, right? The whole zip file. But mine happens to be here. It was a training from April 18th. And that's the case I want to use. So I'll click on OK. And the lower was fine. So we're just going with the upper. But I'm going back and get the whole original case. All right, so you'll get this message to pop up and says it's been copied. And if you want to modify at this point, if you want to change the materials, if you decided on a different, if you want to go to carded teeth instead of mill teeth, you can do that here. But I mean, obviously we want to use, so I very rarely modify at this point. It would only be an odd occasion that I would need to modify this order. So now that I've copied the original design into, and what 3Shape has gone and done is gone and selected the original mold in the original setup, the original gingival contours, the original borders, the anatomical landmarks, all of that from the original design is now in this case we just set up. So now it's time to start, but there's not going to be a lot to do here, but there are a couple of things I want to go through the workflow and show you, what we have to look for. All right, I'm going to have to go back to Zoom and share screen one now. All right, so this window pops up and it says, do you want to keep design? And clearly I do, right? And I'm going to compare it, but I do want to keep the design. There is a question, copy and reuse try-in option only available in 23. No, it started in 22. All right, so everybody see the two dentures. This is not anything to do with that. This is 3Shape telling me my dongles are limited. So there's my original. There at the bottom is the modified. You can see the wash impression. And if you look over here on the posteriors of the lower, they've been ground away. All right, so now I have two cases I have to align. All right, and so this is something else that will hang you up occasionally. You think it's got to be aligned perfectly like some of the other alignment we do. We really aren't aligning point by point, tissue point by tissue point. What we're really doing is making sure that 3Shape understands where the cervical, the gingival design was. So we're really aligning our sculpting from before. So it's really not hard. I'm going to always do a 3-point alignment. And there's a couple of options here, co-directional and opposite directional. Co-directional means you're looking at the same thing. So denture and denture. I would select the opposite directional if my scan was of a model, right? So the cases I mentioned earlier, sometimes the doctor will send it back, and what you'll do is you'll scan that in your lab scanner, and or you maybe even pour it, right? And you'll end up with basically a virtual model, and that would be an opposite. We'll go through that case in a second. This is a co-directional, and we're doing 3-point alignment. And so you just find something that's relatively close, and we can tweak it a little bit. Let's go right here. Second point. No, that's worn down. And then let's go to the other side. Maybe that second molar there too. And what I always like to do when I get these 3 points is click preview. And what I'm looking for is just that basic modeling. I just want to see the fact that I get a little bit of modeling. It doesn't have to be exact border for border because the borders aren't the same, two different cases. So I've got a good blend there, and I'm okay with that. And you can see, the purple is where it was, and the tan is where it's been ground down to. So you can clearly see the differences in the two dentures. But now that's aligned. And the next step is because we imported it as a digital impression, it's going to
Huh?
go to refine scan step.
Nothing.
So seen all this before, right? Anytime we bring in digital impression, this is 3Shape's analytical refine options. And we have to tell it, number one, if you can see my refine scan, the scan type is an impression. Even though the doctor scanned it with a wand, he was scanning an impression. So we check that box. I'm going to select all. I want to refine all three of these things. And that's the different colored blinking handles you see. They all connotate something like an island, an intersection, an artifact, a border, a hole in the scan. And I'll click refine and it will clean all that up. It may take it a couple of minutes. I will try to answer questions as we go while we're waiting on 3Shape to calculate. Could this be used for altered cast workflow? That's a good question. I would think so. If you have both data, the original and then the modified or the altered cast, you could say that's, yeah, I would think so. I've not tried it. It's a good point. Be interesting to see. If anybody else knows, answer that in the meeting chat if you've done that. All right, so now we've got it refined. We will click next. And it's going to say, well, here's your lower. It could use some refinement. In all honesty, guys, when I'm doing a single, the upper I'm just using for opposing and bite. I don't refine here. I don't need to. The only reason I would need to refine this scan was if I was going to do something with it. And primarily that means I wanted to print it as a model. If I wanted a physical model for some reason, right, I would refine this to clean up those edges and borders. Now, one thing I notice here, I notice that the bite is open on the left side, right? We're gonna bring that back up in a minute. That could be an issue, but I'm not going to refine this. I'm just going to click next and move on to the next step, which is occlusal alignment. And I'm aligning the scan, not necessarily the plane of occlusion for the denture. So not super meticulous here, but just close. And so now we've got the scans in, we've got them merged, and now we're at the trim upper jaw. What is the trim upper jaw? The trim upper jaw is, so here's my impression, right? And I need to turn it into a model. So this is where I'm going to draw that border for my stone. So this is kind of like the red rope wax, like we learned with the reference denture. So I'm going to try to capture all the data that's there. But I don't want to go too far over that edge because it's irrelevant data, but just obviously the impression data. Looking for that green color on the inside of the impression, making sure I've captured everything I want. All right. Again, the lower jaw, I'm not necessarily going to need to trim it because I'm not going to make the model, but it just means that if I don't trim it, the edge of that scan is going to create what would create the base of the model. And you'll see it in a second. It'll look, really funny. But again, it doesn't matter to me that it looks funny. All I need is those occlusal surfaces. So I'm going to skip the trimming of the lower jaw and move right back to the upper jaw for sculpting. Check chat. Oh, good. So this should look familiar. If you're with me last time, right? This is very similar at this point, these steps are very identical to the reference denture workflow. So we now have a model that, we might want to clean up. We see things that, and I'm just using the smooth tool here. So I'm not taking anything away from the model, but I'm just cleaning up areas to give me a smooth border for my denture.
You want to get your bowl ready? Jeremy should help you with that, sweetie.
Okay. I could also cut my post stand, but it looks like it's already here if you can see it. But if I wanted to define that some more, I could do that on this model because now it's basically a poured virtual model of that scan.
Right,
Add a bead line or enhance my post stand more if I wanted to. Here's what I mean about the weird looking, because you don't trim that lower jaw. That's what you end up with. It's just on the screen. I'm not printing that. All right, occlusal plane. How am I going to set my occlusal plane? I'm looking at both the bite and the original design. And in reality, what I really want to do is look at that bite because it was, ground down over here.
Okay.
But I can also bring back the scan of the denture. All right, help use that to line up. All right. So those are the main points. Now notice now we're at where the action starts about, where we're putting anatomical landmarks. But look, the landmarks are already here. And because they were placed when we did the original design. So it would have to be a really significant change. Really, the new impression was, 3 millimeters shifted one way or the other that you would notice anything odd about these. But if it had done that, right, I always take a gander at these. And if you want to move these at this point, you can. But normally, if they're not, abnormal, I'm going to move forward because this is the area that you typically would have to adjust. Again, depending on how changed the data is, because remember, this stone model was created from a wash impression in your original design. The line that you're looking at here is your original border that you drew in the original design. So, quite often, if I'm going to print a prototype denture for try-in from a dentist who had put the intraoral wand in the mouth and scanned soft tissue, which you guys, if you've ever heard me speak, I don't advocate that. It's just too difficult, too challenging. But, 1 out of 10, docs will try it. And so we start with intraoral scan. In almost every single one of those cases that I've done, that all my friends have done, when you start with an intraoral scan and you print a prototype denture, you 99% of the time are going to have to do a wash impression in it. It's just not going to fit like our reference dentures or wash impression dentures fit because of the mucocompression. So when somebody sends me an intraoral scan for a denture and I make a prototype, I typically leave the border short because I want to leave room for that wash impression to capture those borders, that heavy body we put around the border. So when I get to this step, if this wasn't a case from an intraoral scan, but if it was, then those borders would be very, very short and I would have to extend them. So this one you can see I need to come out a little bit with it because obviously the first scan, whatever it was, right, did not capture the data all the way out here. So I'm going to extend these out. I'm going to check, make sure we're back in the palatal seal area good. That, you just want to check the border carefully. Sometimes it'll be a little bit further out than it needs to be because of the previous impression. So this is a really the first thing that you really have to look at modifying, and, it's not typically a big modification. So just a few minor changes there, and we're good to go forward to the tooth setting screen. We're gonna go through blockout, of course, and you guys know we've been through this, right? I next through this unless it's a really severe undercut. All right. So what's going to happen now is it's going to get our original setup, get that invalid option occasionally, and can't get a good answer from 3Shape. And what I do is this clears it out every time so far. Yep. I went back one screen and came up one screen, and that cleared that out. I'm can't get an answer what that is or why it is, but if the teeth are gray and you get that invalid option, just go back a step. So that's my original setup, right? And the first thing I noticed, I mentioned to you earlier, let me turn off the plane, is that the left side had an open bite, right? And so, when the dentist modified this try-in and then took the bite, they didn't take it with a bite registration. So they basically held the prototype and the lower denture in their hand and scanned the bite in their hand. And what it turned out was that this just tilted up on them and they didn't see it. It's one of the reasons I recommend to dentists all the time that, look, when you're taking a bite registration, even if it's in the same space, it's a good idea to squirt some bite material in between the teeth to help hold them together for the scan. So, this would be a call, right? I got this case in front of me and I'm looking at that and I'm saying that can't be right. So I'm picking up the phone, calling the doc, say, hey, was it open on the left side? And is that the way you want the final? And clearly, 99% of the time, I don't think 99,000% of the time, I don't think anybody said, no, I meant for it to be open. So they just missed the bite. And, a couple of options here. I'll show you how I'm going to handle it here in a second. But, I could say, well, look, I need a new bite. You still got the dentures, the patient gone. And that all depends on what's there. And okay, in this case, the patient had already left. They were wearing the prototype. So, they did the wash, impression, the modifications, scanned all that, cleaned all that up and gave the patient the denture back and out the door they went. So I've got this data and it put my original setup into that new arrangement, but that new arrangement wasn't 100% accurate. It's right on the other side, right? So you can see that if I take, sorry, wrong one. You can see if I take it away, right, you can see the grinding there, but still open over there a little bit. So what I've got to do now is I've got to figure out how am I going to get these teeth in the right spot. Now, normally the left side's going to be an occlusion. I'm not going to worry about that. What I'm typically looking at is, what has been changed, right? What's different? And, really in this one, the only thing's different is the intaglio, which has already been taken care of by 3Shape. And the only other thing here is on this right side. But as you can see, 3Shape's kind of already taken care of that too. You can see that it set those teeth to the new bite in occlusion with that lower. That's the way the other side should look, but it's not. So I'm going to have to deal with that. And I'll show you how to do that. It's actually really not hard. One of the most other common things that we see is that you'll see a black line marked with a Sharpie if the midline's off, right? If the dentist says the midline's off and I drew you a line, then I would see that line right here. And if I can see that line, then I would know where to move the teeth to, correct my setup to that midline. And that is typically the movements that I make, right? Midline, and then how much tooth is showing. That's the second most common thing, right? And so what I would want my dentist to do, and again, the second case we do, you'll see it, is a cervical line, right? Show me where the cervical line of the teeth and the gingival margin of the denture base should be. And so if it's, if the teeth should be dropped down a little bit, then obviously there'll be a line incisally of the gingival margin as it sits here. And I'd see that and I just move the teeth to it. But in this case, what's really off here is that occlusion on the right side. The midline that was good. The right side, 3Shape took care of, but I'm going to try to save the impression here, or getting the patient back to rescan it. And so all I'm going to do is that I'm going to rotate a little bit. That was not the right way. That was one tooth. I need the global tool. So I'm going to rotate the whole arch a little bit and then drop it back down into occlusion. I always turn my heat map on after I do things like that because I want to. All right, so I went too far. That's a lot better. Just a few spots here. But realize what I'm doing is that I'm setting these teeth, which are arranged the way I arranged them initially in the design. And so they were brought in that arrangement, but I'm now just adjusting them to the new occlusion. And 3Shape did most of the heavy lifting there. Otherwise, I'm not doing anything else. Everything else has been done. And so this case is ready to proceed. The last thing I want to really check would be the tissue, right? The contours that I'd done before. Maybe the patient said, or the dentist said, that it looked too flat or bland. And I said, yeah, it kind of made it simple, knowing it was a prototype try-in. So in this one, I'm going to go pick my more anatomical wax up, which is JStegall wax in my computer is what I have saved, and select that one. And that's just going to change the anatomy of the wax up. Nothing really is going to change around the margins, the papillas. They should all have fallen right in place to this new position. We will check that, right? So the things I'm going to check are the border, the denture border. I'm going to check, if there's a line on the midline, cervical line. Of course, I'm going to look at that. And then I'm going to check the wax up contour. I'm really just looking at it. I very rarely have to do anything to it, but we'll see here with that change in anatomy that I selected. But, all the papillas seem pretty good. Cervical rolls seem to be lined up right. Again, that's the beauty of 3Shape. It just brought everything into this new, and if you think about it, it's not really moving the teeth to the new data. It's actually moving the new data to the teeth. So what 3Shape is moving is the model of the bite to correct for what was there. You can always go back and look at what was there so you can see the change that had been made. But you could also bring up your 2D designer, right? And you could see the two because, both the old denture, the modified try-in, it's all going to be there. So I could do a 2D slice and see all three things and see what differences exactly have been made. All right, so the only other thing to do at this point is to just click through the design. I'm not changing my connector settings. That's exactly the way I want them from before. Sculpt anatomy. Sculpt anatomy, what I would do is turn on the articulator tool like we did last time. We're going to go into that in the fourth session a little bit more, but I would bring up the articulator tool once I got into the sculpt anatomy phase and run those excursions and, tap it in a little bit. I mean, you saw the color mapping. It was actually pretty darn good. So I don't anticipate a lot would needed to be done here. But, if I wanted to tweak this, I said, you know what, I'm really not liking that cuspid, the way it looks. So let me stretch that out a little bit and bring that lateral over a little bit. Maybe I want to morph this tooth down a little bit. That really is not something that I would do very often because this was already been in the patient's mouth and approved. And, the only thing was changed was a new impression wash and a new bite. So other than bringing the articulator up at this point and going through excursions and tapping it in, not doing anything else. So let that calculate, see if we got any questions. Nope, all good.
Hi, guys. Mr. Dickey. How you doing, sir?
Everybody doing all right? It might be time for a new 3Shape computer. All right. Well, we're out of the way. So the last thing I'm checking, right, other than to make sure that my papillas and everything, then they look, yeah, I might want to smooth up some of this. But we want to take a close look at our T-bars as well. If the new bite data or the new impression data shifted the denture one way or another, sometimes if your T-bars weren't fully embedded in the file before, you might see a gap around one of the T-bars and you're going to have to touch that up or add another T-bar in. So I just double check that. But those are the T-bars that were originally designed with my original design, right? I'm not having to do any of this over again. We just brought it all in. And if that denture base is good, then we'll just go through the coupling mechanism steps. Again, because it segments, typically goes really easily here. All right, we do have an error. All right, so that's probably because that little stretch I did. And it's going to fix that for me. I guarantee it, that was between the cuspid and bicuspid. And it's going to trim that back automatically. Another cool feature of the, yep, that's what it was, because the first one was on the cuspid, now that second one was on the bicuspid. So that'll fix that for me. Pre-manufacturing settings all look good. And we finalized. And so this workflow, if let's just say it didn't fit and it's just new wash impression, it really is nothing but checking the borders and just taking a glance at everything else. If the midline's needs to be changed, or the cervical edge or incisal length, there's been a lot of grinding on the occlusion, then you saw what I did. It's just very little. And again, this, I shouldn't have had to have done that right side, because it's just a misbite, which is reality. It does happen, so we have to be prepared for that. But I was able to fix it pretty good and maintain that good color map occlusion. You saw the heat map, so pretty satisfied with it. All right, any questions? Let's see. All right, this is a good question, Rick, for everybody. Why don't everybody do me a favor and enter in the chat whether you're using Windows 10 or Windows 11.
I don't know what I'm using. That's a good question. I think it's 11.
For your 3Shapes.
Yeah. Can we put 11? Windows 11. I didn't know we were using 11.
I'm on 11, Rick, and I didn't really notice a change at all. Dr. Chiwaka, you were on 11. Andy's on 11. If you guys, David, our friend in Anchorage, he's got both. He's got one on 10 and an 11. David, did you notice a difference when you went working between the two? Do you see a difference in 3Shape behavior? I'd go to 12 if it could make this dreaded delay of calculating every mouse move I've made. 3Shape dance, I call it. Mine seems to stick on 68% for an extended time. Dr. Cranford is listening, and his son, Will, is a dentist, and being of a 20-something age, yeah, he is the one to ask, Bill. All right, case is done. Ready to go, so I can close it out and bring it back over here. I was trying to be cute with two screens. I'm not sure that was a good idea. So case is calculating and, generate my cam. So there's my new denture, and I'll have the STLs for the teeth and the base ready to go. So that's the modified try-in workflow. If the doctor took the prototype, adjusted it, wash impression, new bite, and then scan that new data with their wand, and that's how I bring it in to start that workflow. Now, I'm going to bring in another case. I'm not sure we will, because we've been going an hour and a half, haven't we? So this is a case that has already been designed, and I've already set it up. And this was a case, imagine the workflow, right? So the denture was modified, midline was changed, the cervical line needed to be moved. There was a wash impression, the bite had changed a little bit. And so the lab poured it and then scanned the models. So that's where we're going to start. Now, they could have scanned the impression, right? But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go get these. I'm going to go import these cases, because 3Shape's got to know, okay, where's the original one? So I'm going to go bring it in. So there's a try-in denture that was created. Bring that one in. Yep, that's it. All right, so I'll show you. This was a denture that upper and lower that was fabricated from intraoral scans. So there's the upper and lower denture was done. Now let me see if I can find the scans. Yeah. So, upper scan, and it actually, wasn't that bad. But this is not typical. So that's where it started. And the bite was one of those Ivoclar centric trays. Right. So there's the bite. And so that's how the original case was fabricated. So it went out, like I said, several modifications. So let me bring in now the case. It's already been set up. Save a little time. Let's go ahead and bring it in, called Final Denture. Shout out to my friend, the 3Shape whisperer, Brandon Smith, for this case. This is one that he showed me a couple of years ago that Actually does a good job of illustrating. So here is the new case setup, right? And Brandon set it up for a full arch of teeth. I think everybody knows I prefer segment, but that's okay. And so here's the case, right? Case is in, it's been scanned, right? You can see that the models, right? So they were poured and the models were scanned with the bite. And now we'll move forward. I think I'm doing this right. Come on, 3Shape. All right, so you can see the modified try-in. So you see the lines that were drawn. And so that's just great data. Of course, there's wash impression data, right, as well, and a new bite. So everything had been changed a little bit. And we're just going to go through and set that occlusal plane to these scans. No, that didn't work. Right, because I just did it before. So let me reset. Import those scans again. Oh, you can't see what I'm doing. I'm sorry. Forget I'm on two screens. I'll bring this back up in here. All right, so upper. All right. All right. So I just reset it, rebrought the scans back in. It seemed to be confused. So now I've got it scanned. Now I'm going to go down here to copy and reuse try-in. And there's my original try-in denture. Yep. Click OK. So this is exactly like before. Same pop-up. If I want to change the materials, I can do it now. But I don't. So I'm just going to go next. Yes, I want to keep the design. All right. So now we've got a model that was scanned and the original denture. So the model is my new data. So now I'm going to have to use anatomical landmarks on the intaglio. So it's 3 points, opposite directional. And it's still not hard. I'll go. Take a peek at that and see if I get lucky. Yeah, looks like I did. Yeah, not bad. But if I'm not gonna let me do that now. There it is. Preview that again. Be a little better. Yeah. Okay. So do that again with the lower. Same concept, 3-point alignment, opposite direction. And top of the retromolar pad. A little trickier here, huh?
Je model weg, man.
I hear a question in there. Oh, not lucky. Yep, not bad. All right. Remember, I'm not lining up exact intaglio and taglio. The new intaglio data is what it is. I'm just trying to get the sculpt tools close. Not super clear. I wish that bite would have been trimmed a little bit more, but we'll make it work. All right, so now we are at sculpt upper jaw. What are we going to do here? Well, it's a model. I'm not sculpting an impression, so I'm not drawing a border. All right, this is where I can smooth. That's not a good sign. You guys still seeing this okay? Okay. All right. I could cut my post dam in there, but this is really where I just clean up bubbles and whatnot. Oh, one's in a little bit of a mess, but all right. I'll go with that so we can be efficient with the question and answer. All right, back to now the actual bite. Obviously, I'm using the new bite data to make sure this is as close as I can get it here. Midline over. Let's check my landmarks. They all look good. Remember from original design. This one's kind of hanging out in space a little bit, so let's bring that one in. All right, so you can see here, this was one taking from original denture, was made from an intraoral scan. So the denture, the prototype try-in denture was intentionally made short because we know from experience that those are most always going to need a wash impression. They're not going to fit the way we want them to fit because of the inadequacies of an intraoral scan on soft tissue. So we're going to have to, clean this line up to get it back to where it really should be on a final denture. Those of you that are good at fast edit line are wondering, why am I not using the fast edit line? It will soon become evident. So once I check that, let's see, we're doing lower two, so lower probably, yeah, lowered really short, made a lot of room for impression material. So uh-oh, that didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. It might be just easier to let's draw this one over because it was so short all the way around. Then I would just redraw this one. Up in here. My mouse battery's dying. That's what's going on. Normally do not redraw the whole spline, but because this one seemed to be short, so it's probably just easier to do this way. But I normally do not. This one, I'm not sure why I remember it was so short. This is a good pause and think about tips and tricks. You see this area right here on this model? That's definitely a problem. Let me show you what I mean. If I want to try to get really down and tight with this, and I got over that, probably get an error here. Let's see. Yeah, right. We've all seen that one, the self-intersections, but you'll see where it is. It's right here. So just as, I'm always looking for those anomalies that you see on the model because they're going to always cause things like that. All right, I'll show you something else we did here. All right, this is something that Brandon does routinely. So knowing that printed prototypes fabricated from an intraoral scan, it's not going to fit the way we want it. Brandon always designs his prototypes knowing well that there's going to be impression material in it. So he almost treats it like a custom tray denture try-in. So he will put spacer using the wax blockout tool to create room for impression material here. But he does something unique in that he puts tissue stops, right? Just, you can see what he's done here in this wax up. So this, remember, this is the original design brought in. So the original design had this spacer under it with these, 4 points that were all the way down so that the original denture would be created. You saw them in the denture, right? The little round things. Those are the tissue stops. Well, now that we have a new impression data, I don't want this anymore. Right. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go use my undo tool, and I'm going to undo all the things that were 11 steps he took to make this, right, in the blockout phase. And I'm just going to undo them all to take it back down to what it was. So now I'm back to, what we really should be. And, I'll check my undercuts, but mainly what I'm doing here is undoing what we did before to make room for impression material. Not everybody puts blockout wax as like a sheet like that to make room for impression material. But it's a pretty cool trick that he does. You just have to remember to, in this phase, in the modified try-in phase, to take it out. Pretty sure he did it on the lower too. Yeah, the area that I would typically create that space would be in the space, a virtual spacer. I'll show you in a second. But I wouldn't be able to do these tissue stops like he did. So, all right, gotten rid of that, and now we're back in our smile composer. So it looks like this was done with the Masad library, which is another nice library. It's got the facial anatomy. I think that's critical when you're printing teeth or milling teeth. You've got to have some good facial anatomy characterization for the light to be able to hit it right and make it look good. All right, so there they are. All right, that's the original setup in the new data. Well, let's see about this new data. No, that's not what I'm looking for. This is what I'm looking for. So you can see that my cervical margin and my midline are off. Right, so that's the new data. 3Shape got it close, but there obviously needs to be some work done. Now, this is where you have to think about this for a minute, right? And I could easily just grab the blue horizontal and move the teeth globally to that midline. But when I'm doing that, I've got the midline right now, but if you've noticed now, the buccal quarter on the patient's left is out further than it should be, and it's not even touching or not visible over here. So what I would want to do, undo that movement, is I want to take this rotation tool, and I'd want to rotate it first to try to split that difference. Right, so, and then bring it over to match that midline. And that cervical line, clearly I need to come down, and that could be down this way, but could also be down this way. That's starting to look better, right? It still could be a little bit further out here, but I can see it breaking through on the incisal ledge, so not really bad at all. But as you can see, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to do anything else. I use the data giving me and to get those teeth in the right position. And 3Shape can't really recognize the black lines, right? So that's just data for us. 3Shape's going to put it to the new intaglio, right? So we know it's going to be not the same as those black lines, but it's an easy fix. Again, let's say I want to change the tissue, but overall, I've already changed my border, so I don't need to do anything else here. And I just let it calculate out. And I'll check my T-bars in the wax up phase. Make sure the papillas, they should be oriented exactly like they were before. It takes a real significant shift in the bite. You know, if you set a full over full and the new bite comes back and the upper's 6 millimeters to the left of where it was, I mean, that's a pretty massive change. And you'll see those changes here, but it would take a pretty significant change for 3Shape not to be able to blend all of our anatomical designs over into this new tooth position or new arch position, let's call it. And that's all the modified try-in workflow is doing. It's moving the arch and the ridge, not the teeth. So it's bringing the new bite data to your old setup, pretty much. So it's nice not having to move teeth or twist teeth or rotate teeth that much, right? You know, we did all that the first time. And as long as the dentist and the patient say, no, we really like the setup, it just didn't fit great, or the bite was off a little bit. Well, just give me the new bite data and I'll bring that exact setup into that new bite data. And that's really all the 3Shape modified try-in workflow is all about. It's taking new bite data, new intaglio data, and bringing it into your original setup. So with this one being set as a full arch, it's only one click instead of my 3 clicks, right? So one click and one. This is where I would bring up my articulator and go through the excursions, dialing it in. But it's full over full, so it's probably very close. It's not going to need much of that at all. A quick check of the wax up, make sure nothing's out of the norm. Oh, looks pretty good. All that work had been done before. No T-bars on this one. Oh, I know why. It was printed in Rodin. Lucitone still requires it to be T-bars. I think they're good for any denture myself, but not going through a lot of heat, maybe it don't. Pre-manufacturing on the upper. And we'll go back through the lower. So as this is calculating, we move into the lower to finish it up. Open it up. You can turn your mics on, ask any questions that you like. Another question in the chat says, if there weren't any models poured, just impression, a new bite that you could scan from the desktop scanner, then is it still considered impressions and use the code directional option? No, in that case, right, if you're actually going to put, you know, this into your lab scanner, right? So when you get into the scan suite, it's going to ask you for, you're going to set it up originally in the admin in the upper right-hand corner. Bring that up. Let's see if I can't modify. Let me modify one of these others so we can have this screen up. So up here where it says digital impression, it would just say impression. Right. You could, and actually in the setup screen, you can even say model, but when you get to the scan suite software, you can tell it's an impression then. But I always just select impression here so that when we get into the scan suite, it prompts you, put the upper impression in. The fact that it's denture is irrelevant, right? And put the lower impression in, put the bite in. And so you would start that way. And then if you do that workflow, then there is going to be that screen where you actually have to draw the border around the impression and it converts it to a model. So the first thing it do is going to be the alignment, though, and it won't be the opposite direction. It'll be the same direction because it's an impression that you scanned. Okay, let's get vectors. Yep. No errors. It's good. Turn that off for a minute. Take a peek. Yep, little poke through. 3Shape should take care of that. Let's see. A little bit of a tight bite over in here. At my side, cuspid's a little bulky, but still a pretty tooth. This is where it'll take care of it. All right. Yep. All good. Now that's going to create problems for the printer. I really need to go back and take care of that. That's an island the printer won't like very much. It's been a little tight over there. Should have noticed that on the sculpt denture base. Why didn't one of y'all point that out to me, right? That's the most okayest dental technician here. You guys are all better than me at this. All right. So it's going to calculate out, and then I'll have 2 new dentures ready for printing. So that's a modified try-in workflow. Once you do it a few times, wonder what all the complications are about. But the problems that you'll see is, right, not finding your original design. You know, if you've got massive amount of cases, you know, sometimes it's just file search. So make sure you have the identifier that it was given in 3Shape in the beginning at sometimes, or patient name, whatever the easiest way to search. But remember that if you can't find it, that quite often it was because it was designed in another computer or on another dongle. So it has to be the same dongle, and it has to be the same version of 3Shape. So if you're using like David, he's got 4 or 5 computers, and if one of them is 22 and the others are 23, if you design the original on 22, the one in 23 should recognize it. But if you design it in 23 and go to 22 to do the second denture, it probably won't design it. So I like to stay in the same version, the same dongle. The next most common question I get is, I'm not getting the step to align, and that's because you didn't import your scans after you set up the case. Remember, that's the first thing. You set up a new case, then you import the new scans, then you copy and reuse try-in. A lot of folks will set up the new case and then immediately try to copy and reuse try-in there, and you can't. You got to bring the new data in first for 3Shape to know and understand what's going on. All right. So if I do a monoblock try-in and just the bite is off, can I take a new bite and just scan the monoblocks and use the copy try-in original design? Yes, you can. Yep. And just know that the scan is your new data. Right? The scan of your monoblocks is a new data. So you set up a new case, but your scans are the monoblocks with the new bite data. Even if that's all the change is, right? If the bite's the only thing that changed, then you can take a bite registration, hold those 2 dentures and scan that, and that's your new scans. And you will, I capture enough of the data so that I can match it up. So in a case like that, you're going to be matching up outer points, not inner points. So just, scan it all the way around when you scan the bite. All right. No other questions? Either it's simpler than I thought, or I did real good about it. All right, let me stop the recording.